Hello, Veteran Outdoorsman here today. We're going to talk today about a very popular, very famous firearm. I've done a little bit on this particular one before, but we're going to get into a little more of the history of it and dispel some myths, hopefully. The 1911. Notice I did not say the Colt 1911. I'm going to get into that here in a minute. But the 1911 was originally designed as a military weapon. The military wanted something to replace the old Colt single action revolver. Ooh, single action army, the peacemaker. Colt single action revolver was what it was originally called. Yes, names of the peacemaker, the single action army. The problem you get into when you call them a single action army, they were produced in multiple calibers. The single action army was only a specific configuration in 45 Colt. Others were called frontiersmen, lightning, etc., in different calibers, but they were all Colt single action revolvers. They had different sub designations. But the Army used the single action in 45 Colt. Typically, that's not the ammo that was chambered into it. I might get into that in a little bit, but there was a shorter version that was used because they had two revolvers at the time. They also had used some Colt later on, Colt double action and Smith and Wesson revolvers, and those were used at the same period of time that these 1911s were. But let's get into the handgun itself. When talking about the history of this firearm, this isn't the best one, but this is the one I've got. Originally, a fixed sight on a dovetail back here. A small blade sight up front. The protrusion wouldn't come too far back here. It would be single stack. It would be chambered in 45 ACP. But this is the same basic design as has been used for over 100 years. The government wanted a firearm to approximate the power of the 45 Colt, the 45 ammunition they were using at the time. They wanted a semi-automatic for faster rate of fire, also for ease of reloading. The Colt single action was very, very slow to reload. You would open the loading gate, tip it up, push the ram down. That's one round. Rotate, push 2, 3, 4, 5, which is typically all that was loaded in the gun, though it held 6. 5 was typically loaded because in order to safely carry it, you had to drop the hammer on an unloaded chamber. If you drop the hammer on a live round, the firing pin would be resting on it. Then you would end up with the potential of putting pressure on it and firing into your leg or to wherever the muzzle was pointed when it dropped, etc., etc. So, they had some safety requirements, different things. Now we're going to get into dispelling some myths. I have heard over and over by guys sitting behind the counter and in front of the counter at gun shops that Colt designed the 1911. This is not true. John Moses Browning designed the 1911. Yes. He designed this. That shouldn't come as a surprise, as he designed most popular firearms between the end of the 1800s and well into the 1900s. the Winchester 1892, Winchester 1894, which I did a small review of not that long ago, 1897, which is a pump shotgun. The Auto 5, obviously, which was also produced as a Remington Model 11. Savage produced one as well under license from Browning. But he designed countless amounts of firearms. No surprise that one of the best was his brainchild. Now, where the confusion starts is that Colt won the manufacturing contract with the government to produce these. So the U.S. ones originally made by Colt. Now, it didn't take long for other companies to start producing them too, because when it comes to a military design, the military will own the design. At least that's how it was at the time. And they license it to different people to produce. I'm sure Browning got paid dearly for his design, but in the U.S., the government could have it produced by multiple companies. Originally by Colt, also produced by Remington, also produced by several other companies. Overseas, the main manufacturer at the time was FN, Fabrique Nationale, who built several of Browning's firearms also, and originally and eventually a big conglomeration which encompassed Browning, Winchester, Moroku, etc., etc. All those companies were together, or are together now. But it was not designed by Colt, as many think, because they're the original manufacturers of it. Just like many of the Winchesters were not designed by Winchester, they were designed by Browning. This was designed by Browning. And that's why it works so well. He was a genius. This man made lots of firearms, designed lots of firearms that just work superbly. The 1911 is no exception. I've heard them called Jam-O-Matics. The Glock fanboys love to talk about all the downfalls of a 1911. Well, I haven't found one yet. There aren't any downfalls of this firearm if this is the type of firearm you're looking for. If you're looking for a striker-fired, polymer-framed handgun, obviously, this is not the gun for you. A steel-framed, hammer-fired gun, single action, is not the gun for you. If you want to point those out as downfalls, go ahead, but it's a completely different type of firearm. This one has an ambidextrous safety. They didn't originally have that. They would originally have one much smaller lever here, but the safety worked just the same. It's also slide lock here. They did all have this grip safety, which people complain about. I've seen a lot of guys go in there and take a piece of bread tie or something and tie it down inside. No need for that, because if you get a good firm grip, it's never going to be an issue. But when you loosen your grip like this, it becomes an issue. It's not fully depressed. You may not be able to pull the trigger. Also, when you loosen your grip like this, odd things happen. You have to have a good grip in order for the inertia of this slide to come all the way back. Just a second. To come all the way back and then forward. Now, if I loosen my grip, it takes a lot more force and it's trying to push back in my hand. But if I've got a nice firm grip, loose grip. And it's sliding. You can't see real well. Let's try it again. Loose grip. See how it slides back? You're losing momentum here. It won't always come all the way back, which means it won't have enough force when it comes forward. It'll jam. But a good firm grip, which is the best for accuracy to start with, no issues. But that's one of the biggest problems I've seen is people complain about them jamming. They do what they call limp wrist. They gotta, like this, they're holding it, boom, boom. You don't have a good firm grip. Slide doesn't come all the way back, doesn't go forward with enough force. You get a jam. You get a good firm grip on this, it'll work. Contrary to popular belief, you can limp wrist just about any firearm, including a Glock, especially the higher powered ones, 45, 10 millimeter, 40 Smith & Wesson. You have more tendency, they have stronger springs, you have more tendency to limp wrist them as well. It's not just a 1911 thing, but a guy that shot a Glock 17 or a Glock 19 for years is going to pick up a 1911, hold it with his usual limp fashion. Boom, jam. Boom, 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 jam. This thing's a piece of junk. No, it's not. You're not operating it properly. Pick up a 45 Glock, hold it the same way. You're going to get the same results. Okay, now that we've upset the Glock fans, that's something I always like to do. Back to the 1911. Nice sliding trigger here, straight back. The grip safety, again, a lot of people don't like it, but if you hold the firearm properly, you don't even know it's there, and it's always engaged. It's got the typical safety here, nice, easy to find. You know, a lot of lefties don't like it. Well, because of the design of the firearm, it's easy to include also on this side. Some have even included the slide lock over here, where it's just a pin that goes through and you're able to operate from this side. This side's lock with this side. But you can certainly get it where the safety is operable on this side. Okay. The fact is that since most people are right-handed, guns are designed for right-handers for the most part. But you can certainly get one that a left-hander can operate. Original would have had just plain slab grips, maybe a little bit of checkering. But just a simple, no-frills firearm. Check this. See, chamber's clear. No rounds in it. Nice firm grip. Pad of the finger. Very, very nice, crisp trigger pull. Some are very heavy. Don't get me wrong. Nice, crisp trigger pull. Now, the 1911, originally from 1911, obviously, served the U.S. military through World War I, alongside some revolvers as well, Smith and Colt double actions specifically, served through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, were replaced in the late 80s by the Beretta 92, but we're still seeing service during Desert Storm and still see some limited service today. But the one that you're going to see in the hands of military personnel is going to look more like this today, and it's for special units. But you still see some service today. But other countries use this for a long period of time. Not just us. I've seen copies for Swiss or Swedish military. I'm not exactly sure. They were produced by FN. Um, they were used in the hands of Filipino soldiers fighting the Japanese. They've been used in militaries just like other firearms that we've had, just like the Mauser. The Mauser was used by multiple militaries all over the world. Get this right. Mauser was used all over the world. Our Springfield was basically a copy of the Mauser, so we even used it. Other firearms that were used. M16 was used by multiple militaries. The FNFAL, used by multiple militaries all over the country, still used today. Same as different AR variants. Still used today, obviously. Mostly in the M4 for the United States. But in some foreign countries, you still see an M16A1. Let's think. Anyway, not uncommon for a popular firearm platform to be used by multiple militaries. You will hear another myth to dispel. You'll hear, well, it won 2 world wars. It's the best gun ever. Okay. If you're a 1911 fan, you probably think it is the best firearm ever. I'm a fan, trust me. I've owned a few. I love them. It did not win 2 world wars. If anything won 2 world wars, it was the cartridge 30-06. The handgun was not used as a first line weapon. The 1911 was not a combat weapon. It was for non-combatants as a secondary weapon for combat troops. But it was not a first line combat weapon. Was it used extensively in combat? Sure it was. Were there battles where the 1911 made a difference? Sure there was. Did it win World War I? No. Did it win World War II? No. If anything won World War I, you want to tie a weapon, a specific firearm. In my mind, you've got 3. Now, some people may argue that that's fine. This is my opinion. The 1903 Springfield, obviously. The 1917 Enfield, yes. The American Enfield, copy of the Pattern 14, because military contractors were building these similar to the standard Enfield you're used to seeing, number 1s, number 3s, number 4. Similar, but not exactly the same, and a much stronger action. We're building these for England, for them for World War I. Then all of a sudden we're in the war, and there's a contract to build rifles. Well, the easiest thing to do was not to retool for 1903 Springfields, but to take the 1914 Enfield, convert it, change over, build them in 30-06. That's where we get to 1917. That was a secondary weapon that was actually used more in World War I than the 03 Springfield, believe it or not. Both of those were used in World War II. But if you wanted to pick a weapon in World War II, I got ahead of myself. 1903 Springfield, 1917 Enfield. And as far as America goes, I would say that's really, I said three, but that's really the two that I can think of. If you were going to take a firearm that was responsible for winning the war, those are the two. Now, World War II, those two were prevalent, but the M1 Garand, by far, I would say, is the weapon responsible for winning the war. If you want to say a firearm, a specific firearm was responsible for winning the war, it was not the 1911. You want to go into other conflicts? Korea, M1 Garand, obviously. Vietnam, M14 originally, very formidable weapon, but the M16 made a big difference in that war as well. M1 carbines from World War II on played a big role. But wars are won by machine guns and rifles, not by handguns. So when you hear somebody say, well, it won 2 world wars, it was on the winning side. That's about all you can say. It didn't win a war. Did it play a big role? Sure. Did it play a turning role in the war? Yeah, no. And I'm a fan, trust me. But it didn't do it. You're going to hear people say, well, it's just too heavy. Okay. If you're smaller framed, if you just don't like carrying extra weight around, I can see that. But one of the most popular handguns that is carried for personal protection, concealed carry, is Glock 19. It's not quite as heavy as a 1911, but you get, say, a commander size with a 4-inch barrel, single stack. This is much slimmer than a Glock 19. The weight isn't that much more. Now, you don't have the round capacity. Do you really need 15 rounds, 17 rounds, 18, 19, whatever you have? Do you really need that? In a self-defense situation? In combat? Buddy, you take this double stack, extend it down to here, and I'm happy. If this is a gun I'm going to have to carry in combat, get me as many rounds as you can get me. Personal defense, I shared earlier in another video how I temporarily modified these mags to hold 10 rounds. Well, they hold 15, 16, something like that. I honestly haven't changed them back over because I haven't seen a reason to. 10 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. Yes, 1 in the chamber. If you do not carry around in the chamber when you carry a concealed firearm, you are wrong. Period. This thing, if it isn't loaded and chambered, it is a club. Now, that being said, this gun will serve as a better club than just about anything out there, with the exception of a high point, which is about 8 ounces heavier. But without a round in the chamber, without a full magazine, this is a club. This is not a gun. It is a club. You don't carry your firearm with a round in the chamber, you're wrong. Period. I don't want to hear comments at the bottom. I don't want to hear excuses. You're wrong. But 10 plus 1 in the chamber, an extra mag in my back pocket, if I need more than that, I upset the wrong people. And I need to be fighting my way back to a rifle for a serious weapon. I'm not going to get out of that situation with a handgun no matter how many rounds I have. If I expend 21 rounds and I didn't do my job, I'm in a bad situation. So, a little bit of history, a little bit of rambling, a little bit of pet peeves. May not have got a lot out of this one, but I hope you enjoyed it. Again, this is Veteran Outdoorsman. Remember that Christ is King. God bless you. We'll see you next time.